Welcome, everyone. This is a community conversation about human design charts. And we had three brave women go ahead and submit their charts with a question. And we may have time for some of you if you have a question. And I definitely would like us to have some interaction about this. So think about what questions you might have as I'm going through what I'm going to talk about today. And then I'm going to take a look at some of these charts and you can see how perhaps what I share relates to your own chart, and I'll make some recommendations about how you can do that. Um, yeah, okay, here we go. People coming in. All right, so, oh goodness, I think I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. Oh, maybe not. Okay, so I wanted to just make a couple of comments about what kind of what to look for in a chart and also how to understand some of the things, not just in terms of learning their names and kind of their characters. I think that the very first thing that we usually do when we come to human design is we kind of look at a chart and go, oh my goodness, there's a lot on there. What does that all that mean, right? What are all those colors and shapes and symbols and why does it look like this or that and all of that? So it's totally understandable to have your kind of first pass at wanting to get familiar with the pieces of the chart. And I do have a couple of videos on my YouTube channel. If you want support with that, if you go to the Start Here playlist, um, there are videos that are like, this is what is on a chart. These are all the parts of it. This is how you can just interpret what you're looking at. Not in the sense of the deep meaning of it, but just at least to know what all the pieces are. Because a lot of times your left brain will relax when you're able to kind of give it that information. Because the first thing it's going to want to do is go, how do I analyze this thing? Right. But the thing is human design is not a logical or analytical system. So if you stay in that mindset as you're trying to approach your human design, you're going to miss the magic of what human design really has to offer you, because it's an energetic, intuitive, spiritual system. And if you even just think about strategies and authorities, they're all intuitive and they're all spiritual. None of them are logical or rational or reasonable or any of that. And so if you keep trying to live your design when you have your left brain dominance happening, it's not going to work very well for you. So if you've been frustrated at all about trying to really kind of get into and live your design and embody it, one of the first things I can say is you gotta get out of that analytical mind and get more in your body and open up your creativity and your intuition. And so this is a lot of what I teach about, like in our Sovereign Sisterhood, is how do we actually get our analytical mind out of the way so that we can start tapping into the inner wisdom that is inside of us, which of course, sacral authority is a form of inner wisdom. All of the other authorities, except for the ones for manifestors, are all intuitive. It's basically you need to talk so that you can hear the good wisdom that's going to come out of you. But it's not a logical thing. You talk until really your soul starts speaking, and then you hear it, and then you know what to do. And so that all of those are, they're all intuitive. And even for manifestors, the idea is that they're tuning in to the energy of the motor that they have connected to the throat. And what is the impulse that is coming from that motor? And it's generally not verbal. And it may not even have images to it, but there's kind of this sense of this push from the inside. Right. And so all of these ways that are fundamental to human design are intuitive and spiritual and energetic. And so that's why it's important to kind of, make your peace with that if you've been really trying to analyze it and get it all, because you'll have a much richer and more pleasurable experience if you approach it in that way. So I wanted to just make a couple of comments about openness and definition, because a lot of times when people first look at a chart, they go, oh, I have this and I don't have that. And I want to just underscore probably something you've heard before, which is that you have the entire body graph in your own energy field. Okay. It's all here. You've got all of it. What's different chart to chart is what's colored in and what's not. And then what it's colored in by, right? What planet, what's activating it. And so the colored in parts we call defined, and we have a consistent relationship to those energies. Those are the energies that you can kind of count on, right? They're meant to be solid, stable, and available to you. The open parts you're also going to have experienced thousands of times throughout the course of your life. It's just that the way you experience them will be variable. It'll change depending on the environment you're in, what's happening with the transits, and the people that you spend the most time with. And so, but those are variable, and your openness is where you are really designed to grow and to explore and to flourish. Many times people think that their design is all about their definition, but it's really not. And I really want to underscore that because some of my most profound experiences of energy in my body is in my openness, not in my definition. So just try to grab a hold of that one, especially if you've heard otherwise, and kind of explore for yourself what that might mean. And the thing about definition is a lot of times people think that, okay, I have this defined. That means I must have the empowered expression of that definition, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that at all. So the way that I interpret the archetypes of the human design system, and there's over 125 of them. There's a lot, but is and also how I work with the 8 pillars of feminine sovereignty, which is what my book is about. Is it's really an exploration of power, if you will. And we're at this time here on planet Earth really looking at what does power mean and how do we want to have a different relationship to power, right? We're kind of done with the power over disempowered thing that we've been moving through for, thousands of years, right? We're like, okay, we want to be done with that. But we also have to be aware of how that old paradigm, right, of believing that the way that we can become successful in life is to kind of be underhanded, to kind of manipulate, if you will, which women have really adopted through the centuries. Because if we've been disconnected from outer forms of power, what did we have? We had ways of manipulating, right? More covert kind of power that we could get through trying to get things to go our own way. But that's a shadow expression in my view. It's a shadow power overway. Whenever you're trying to control or manipulate yourself or other people or situations in order for you to feel more safe, number one, which might be a really underlying feeling that you're not even aware of, but also for you to kind of get what you want. You want the situation to go the way you want. You want the conversation to go the way you want, right? Whenever you do that, you're expressing a shadow quality of power. Disempowered, of course, is where we either are rejecting a certain kind of power, right? We're going, oh, that's not for me, right? I know I've been talking a lot in my transit reports about leadership because we have so much leadership in the astrology right now. Jupiter's in the 31, Mars is about to move in the 45. Those are two the main leadership gates, right? I mean, there's so much leadership and power that is being activated right now, through the transits. And yet I know a lot of people are kind of like, leadership, I don't know if that's for me, because a lot of times what we see is the leadership that's out there. We're like, well, I don't want to be a leader like that, right? And so sometimes we give away our power or we suppress our power because we don't want to express it in a way that's like the way that people do the shadow, the coercive power over kind of way of expressing, right? We don't want to do that. So then we actually kind of either suppress or give away our power. So the other alternative, so there's, 3 forms here. The other alternative is what I would call the more awakened experience of power. And it's more empowering. It's more personally empowering in a genuine way because it comes from the inside and it's not interested in trying to manipulate or coerce or be in charge of other people. It's really about being able to tune in to your authentic energy field. You really, your, what I would call, your wise one within or your higher self, right? Tuning into that aspect of you and building your relationship, and that will give you energetic spiritual power. And that is one of the things I think human design is actually very, very good at helping us understand. And so when you're looking at your design and you're looking at the different parts of the chart, have in mind for yourself, right? Are you inhabiting this in a way that where it's really enlivening you? You feel, energized by it, you feel guided by it, and you're like, yes, this feels in alignment with my inner being, right? With my higher self, because you can know if you're aligned with your higher self by the way you feel, because your higher self is always feeling good. Your higher self is always rooting for you. It's always wanting you to be in an expansive, open power from the inside, from your heart and from your belly, right? This kind of power, it always is supporting you to be like that. And anytime you're not, that's when you don't feel so great. That's when you worry. That's when you feel resentful. That's when you feel disempowered. That's when you feel fragile. That's when you feel angry or outraged, right? All of those other emotions are not the emotion of your true higher self, because the higher self doesn't act that way. So that's how you can know if you're more in that awakened expression. But you can also look to say, yeah, I kind of do, I mean, my son is in the 21, which is in traditional human design is known as control. And I've really had to work that one over the course of my life, right? I was so much more controlling when I was younger, right? Because I thought that was the way to be. And I thought that was the way to create success in my life, right? Was to really be in control of situations. And I did accomplish a lot being that way, honestly. And, the outer world actually rewards us a lot of time being that way. So you kind of got to look at that one, right? Is are you in that way? And it might surprise you when you're just really being radically honest with yourself about where you might be doing that. And then the other one is where you're like if you have a center that's defined in your chart or a gate that's defined in your chart, and you read the description of it and you're like, I don't feel that at all. I don't feel that at all. And this is pretty common, more common than you would think. That means you're experiencing the disempowered expression of that energy in your chart. And very often it means you've suppressed it. Okay, you've rejected it, you've suppressed it because somewhere in your life experience could also be coming from your soul journey, right? Could have been from other lives, could be in your ancestral line, but somewhere in your field, you believe that experiencing and expressing that energy is dangerous on some level, right? And this happens very often with the emotional solar plexus. I've run into many women who have, really suppressed their emotions in order to feel like they could be more empowered in mainstream culture. And, I mean, I've had like women who are, executives in corporate America, and they have all this emotional definition, and they're like, no, I'm not emotional at all. And you can tell they have just pushed it down. But the thing to know about emotional energy is when you suppress it, it doesn't go away. It just goes deeper, and it can wreak havoc inside of you if it's not being allowed to flow and express. So just notice that for yourself. It's especially true with emotions, right? Because emotional energy is the strongest energy that we have in our field, right? If you think about when you're in a really elevated emotional state, whether that's fear or joy, it takes over your entire field, right? It's like you're just, it's there. And you want to realize that that's like that. And then not necessarily, especially if you're emotionally defined, it's not when you're going to make decisions, right? Because you don't want to be so controlled by your own emotional energy. Okay. Um, but it happens in other parts of the chart as well. And I notice a couple of the women, and maybe all of them, you too, Michelle. Yeah, actually, all of the women, this is highly unusual. All of the women who sent in their charts today all have a defined will center. Now, The will center is not commonly defined. 7 out of 8 people have the will center open. So it's not very common. It's right up there with the head, right? The head is very uncommon to have it defined. And then the will, and then the ajna. Because if you just look at the number of gates on those different centers, you'll see, oh yeah, there's only 4 gates on the will. There's only 3 gates on the head, right? So it's not easy for these centers to get defined. So when you have them defined in your, you have this defined in your chart, that's an unusual thing. Now, sometimes people think, oh, the will center, and I did talk about the will center in the transit report I released today because this 4521 channel is starting is I think it's, yeah, today's the 23rd. So Mars moved into the 45 today, and Saturn has been in that 21. And so this is going to create a complete channel for us until the end of the month because Mars is going to be in there. So if you have that open, and if you have the throat open or the will center open, I have both of them open. So this is going to bring me a lot of extra definition, right, through a transit. Um, but just know the will center, right, is a motor. It's the third weakest motor. It's not a super strong motor. And its name, or the motto that goes with it, is that it works to rest. Okay, I'm getting worked up here. I got to take my That's what happens when I start talking. Um, don't worry about the tape on my shoulder. I'm fine. Um, uh, yeah, so the will center works to rest. And if you think about willpower, right, we are really not designed to live by being able to force things through with our willpower. We're not really designed to do that, right? And if you have had that in your background, chances are you have exhausted yourself. You burned out at some point because the will center is not that powerful. And it really, the way that it was originally described to me is it's like a bank account. Okay. And so you need to keep making deposits into your bank account. And if you keep taking deposit, distributions out of your bank account, right? I'm going to use my willpower. I'm going to use my power. I'm going to use my power, right? You're going to deplete your bank account and there's not going to be anything in there, right? And then when you go to do it, it's like, and then you don't have it. And that is burnout. It's one source of burnout. So do you have, at that point, you really need to restore. You need to restore and rejuvenate because you need to be putting deposits back into your will center, right? Which you will get by doing energy work, by resting, by doing the kind of neurosomatic intelligence work that I teach in our Sovereign Sisterhood. Whatever it is that you can do, spend a lot of time near a river or an ocean or in the forest so that you can be rejuvenated by nature, right? By the living world. Because the living world has really a lot to give us when we get burned out. So that's a tip. Just know if you get burned out, go spend a lot of time in the living world. It'll really help. Okay, so I wanted to say that piece because the will center is known as the center for money and value and worthiness. And I have met so many people with defined wills who do not have a strong sense of worthiness. So it's important to understand with definition. Just because it's defined, it does not mean that you are expressing the empowered and awakened character of whatever that is, whether it's a center or a channel or a gate. It doesn't necessarily mean that. And many people, especially women, have been conditioned into the disempowered expression of the will center. Many people. And because women in general have been conditioned over time to have a kind of dicey relationship to money and also to our own sense of our own value and our own worthiness, right? And so if you have trouble with worthiness, just know it's like all of us, right? All of us. And I think that this is in some way the biggest thing that humanity needs to heal right now is the conditioning about being unworthy. Because when we're unworthy, we tend to be a little cowardly, and then we tend to be more manipulative. If you just think about how those things kind of compile, right? Because when we feel unworthy, we don't feel like we actually have the power to be able to create our lives the way that we want to, right? And then we can feel a little like this, and then we're like, okay, how can I get what I want? Right. So watch out for that for yourself because it's actually very common. It doesn't make you a bad person. if you do that. It doesn't make you a bad person at all. Okay. So that's the thing about definition is you want to be as interested in your conditioning in your definition as you are in your openness. I know in traditional human design, they just say, you're conditioned in your openness. I have not found that to be true at all. I have found that people are conditioned in all parts of their human design, and myself included. And so it's important for us to kind of get a handle on all of that, right? So that we can um, know what's really happening because our definition is what we radiate out into the world, right? Those centers, they radiate out, right? And you want to know what that energy is. And if you've got a defined will and you're experiencing a lot of unworthiness, guess what? You're radiating unworthiness out into the collective, right? And you don't want to do that. None of us want to do that, right? So just to say, because like I said, all three of these women have defined will centers. So I hope that's hopeful for those of you who brought in your charts because there's a lot of misunderstanding about that and lack of agreement about that. So that's what I say. So let's go ahead and let me just see if there's any particular. Um, Jade, I don't have your chart. If you didn't send it in to me this week. So maybe you sent it before the last community conversation. Is that what you did? I think I see you nodding.
I did.
So,
I just posted
okay,
in the
you
chat
you
though.
stuck it in the okay, great, perfect. Okay, I'm just looking over here. So that's Jade. All right. So saying hi to everybody in the chat. Okay, great. Perfect. So like I said, put any comments or questions in the chat and I will come back to those later. So let's go ahead and take a look at this chart first. Okay. So this is Deanna's chart and she is a manifester and she is a kind of spiritual teacher type of person. And she was, let me just see what I want to share from what she's saying. She's just saying that she has had trouble really creating money through the work that she loves to do in the world. The way that she articulated this is how to step into more into leadership role of using her voice as a transformative tool for others, right? And she's very metaphysical. She's an astrologer. And so she's really curious about that. So as a manifester, she's going to have a motor to the throat. So here she's got the will center, right? That's right here, connected directly to the throat through the 4521. And that is also known as, in traditional human design, that channel is known as distribution, or sorry, is known as the money line. And then quantum human design, it's known as distribution. And so it has a lot to do with resources, with value, with money. And so right off, I would say if somebody has this particular channel and they have challenges with money, then I would say to you, Deanna, and to any of you that experience this, is to really look at your energy around money. Because with this particular channel, money should not be an issue for you. Okay, should, right? Which means that you probably have either from your own life experience or from, maybe your beliefs about being a spiritual person or metaphysical person. There's a lot of people who have a kind of, that poverty consciousness that goes with artists a lot, spiritual people, all of that. The programming around that is really deep. It's really deep. And so that's the first thing I would say is to really dive into if you look at what has happened in your life in relation to money, like just kind of take a scan of like what your experience has been. And if you look at that and you ask yourself, okay, what beliefs would I need to have in order to have that experience with money? Right? What would I need to be thinking or believing or having active in my own energy field for it to produce that result? because that is, from a metaphysical point of view, right? Whatever's happening out there is coming from in here, right? We're all creating what's happening around us, right? And so that would be the very first thing I would do is really go and ask yourself about that. Another thing here is she's got just one motor defined, and like I said, the will is not one of the more stronger motors. The sacral is the strongest. The emotional solar plexus is second, then the will, then the root. And so she doesn't have a lot of innate power in her chart other than this particular configuration, right? Because the spleen is not a motor, the throat is not a motor. And so I would think that for her, she would really need to make sure that she is taking very good care of herself, getting really good rest, really making sure that the basics are in place. So let me talk about the basics for a second, because there have been some questions about burnout, and I know an issue for a lot of people, right? And part of it is living off your design that will lead you, and can't very well can lead you into burnout. And anybody can burn out. A manifesting generator can burn out, generators can burn out, doesn't matter. Anybody can burn out if we're not doing the basics. So the basics, okay, is nourishing food that's right for your body, clean water, good clean air, lots of restful sleep, and plenty of time outside in the living world, and regular movement, moving your body. Your brain needs movement in order to function. And if you're one of those people who is like sitting around a lot, as a lot of us do because we're working on computers, it's really important that you make sure that you get up and you move. So those are the basics, right? It's like food, water, air, rest, sleep, time outside, and movement. Um, so just all of you take a note of that. And you can even go down when you start to get tired, like really go through that list and see how you can increase it, because anybody, right, can get really depleted especially if a number of those you're not getting. So that's the first thing, is just make sure you've got the basics in place, and work at it incrementally. Like if you're like, oh my God, I totally don't get the right sleep. I stay up too late, and then I don't sleep well, and then I get up early. And don't think that you have to suddenly try to get it to change by tomorrow, but do work on it. Pay attention to it, because this is your body's way of letting you know that it's not getting what it needs. Okay. So that's one thing. She doesn't have a lot of motors. And she's got that will center. Um, and this configuration, so she's asking about her voice, right? But she also has the 5720 over on the other side of her body, right? Which is a highly intuitive channel, right? It's in the knowing circuit. This one is tribal circuitry. This is the leadership channel of tribal circuitry. This one is connecting her throat to her spleen. It's what's defining her spleen, and it's highly intuitive. And so, one of the questions I would ask you, Deanna, to think about is, how in touch with your intuition are you? And how much might any kind of sense of fear be getting in the way of you being able to access your intuition? Because the spleen, and this is also for you, Michelle, because you were asking about your open spleen. So it's different, defined and not defined, but many of the things are similar. So the spleen is the center for instinct and intuition, the immune system, and right timing. And because it's a center for instinct, it can fall into fear. And let's remember that instinctual fear is all about preserving the aliveness of the physical body, right? That's the brain's number one priority, is keeping the physical body alive. right? And that's your instinct, right? That your nervous system will always default to that if it feels that the physical body is in danger. And if it really is in danger, it's awesome, right? Because it all of a sudden can give you almost superhuman powers to jump out of the way of a speeding bus, right? Um, but you don't want to live with that part of your nervous system activated. And a lot of times we have it activated at a low level and it's very exhausting because your brain is always kind of searching for threat, right? And in our technological, fast-paced, toxic world that we live in now, it's pretty common for a lot of people to have a kind of low-level anxiety that's just kind of always there, right? And what is anxiety? It's a form of fear. And you want to really ask yourself if you have low-level anxiety, like what am I afraid of? Like what is this about? And work with that and unpack it a bit. Do some energy work to help release that fear from inside of your body, right? So you want to look for that because if your spleen falls into fear, it's very hard to access your intuition. And so, in order to really get the beauty and the guidance that comes from the spleen, you have to learn how to work with your fear. And it's not by just suppressing it; it's more by understanding, what is the program that's in your mind that is telling you that you're in a dangerous environment. And that could be like, I'll just make some things up, Deanna. This isn't necessarily in your chart, but for people who are spiritual and people who are metaphysical, sometimes that fear is to be persecuted if they actually use their voice, right? And especially for women, because we know about the witch trials, we know that there was a huge amount of persecution against women who spoke out for hundreds of years. I mean, literally thousands, tens of thousands of women, a lot of women. Okay. It wasn't just a few. And so we've got some of that in the cells of our body sometime. So if you don't really see it in your life experience, you might be go, oh gosh, this is some residue from a long time ago, because there is the thing about visibility, okay? Visibility, using your voice, is a lot of us crave it and are afraid of it, right? We want to be seen. We want to be recognized. We want to be appreciated. We want to be known for the gifts that we have and the service we can provide, right? We want that. Like that's a beautiful thing to be bringing into the world. But there's another part that's usually deeper down in here, right? That's going, oh, but that's dangerous. People are going to attack you if you do that. You're going to get a lot of, even just like negative comments, right? On social media, what could happen? And particularly if you come out of a family lineage, right, where people were actively persecuted, right? Jewish people can have this, people of color can have this, like African Americans, indigenous people, certainly in the United States, but it's not just those people. I mean, it could be just people who have a history in their lineage of having been persecuted. So that's another place to look because that can just really undermine your ability to even use a powerful motorized throat, which is what this person has. Is that it's this that will is going right to the throat, right? But then it's also being contributed to by the spleen. So do what you can to release any fear that you can, identify that's kind of just working in there, right? And this is why we do a lot of breath work, why we do Kundalini yoga, why we do neurosomatic intelligence work, so that we can keep clearing our field of the old imprints that are undermining our ability to step into the full potential of our design. That could also influence your relationship to money, right, Deanna? So all of those things are there. Because like when I look at something like this, I go, yeah, she should be able to really create money with her voice. And she's saying that's what I can't do. So that is where I would look. Like anytime we get that disempowered expression, we want to look at, well, what is our what is our belief system around the thing that we want to do? The other thing is that for people who have a really open chart like this, right? She's only got three centers defined, and then also doesn't have many motors. Is that if she's depleted, right? If she doesn't have those basics really in place, and it could be easy for a person like this, especially if since she's a manifestor, she wants to go out and make stuff happen, right? But if she doesn't also rest and restore sufficiently, her nervous system can clamp down on her ability to engage, especially with new things that are going to take a lot of her energy to be able to do them. Because new things require energetic resources. And if you're depleted, your nervous system might just be like, nope, we do not have the energy to be able to engage with new things or to engage with things that we feel are going to be energetically expensive. And then the last thing I want to say, Deanna, to you here is that I noticed that you said that you really like going on. Said you're having a hard time navigating the online world, but you love speaking on interviews and podcasts because it's organic. And you can create a whole business doing interviews and speaking on podcasts. So you don't have to necessarily go and build a huge social media, presence and, build a YouTube channel and all of that. If you can regularly get on podcasts and you can regularly be interviewed, you have to have the right offers that you then direct people to, right? Because they're on the podcast and you say right there, here's where you can get in touch with me. And this is whatever you might want to give them. Like this is a cheat sheet for astrology, or this is a meditation that I have to give to you, or whatever it is. So you have to have those things in place so that you can capture the attention that you get when you're interviewed or you're on a podcast. But those are examples of where you really get to use your voice. So if you love being on those, I would say go and do that. Because it also gives you experience and practice about using your voice. And then you can notice if fear gets going at all for you. And then you can practice releasing the fear before you get there. You can practice really filling yourself with energy so that you can be powerful when you're speaking. So that's pretty much, I think, what I wanted to say about your chart, Deanna. So if you have a follow-up question, or if you have a comment, Deanna, I think, yes, I see you're here. So I would love to hear in the chat, and I'll come back to this later, but I would love to hear from you about how that landed for you. Okay, so let's take a look at Michelle's chart. And we already talked about a little bit of this, but so Michelle asked, what does having an open root and an open spleen mean? Now, you can read in a book about what they mean, right? And what the kind of disempowered expression and more empowered expression is. But we always want to look at these things in the context of the whole chart, right? And that's why I wanted to do some of these sessions with you, because we want to look at it in the context of the whole chart. So you can see every other center in her chart is defined, right? So if we think about this, right, that means she has a consistent way of experiencing all of those channels and gates and centers, right? She's got 7 centers defined. That's a lot. So she's got a pretty consistent energy. Where she has variation is going to be in her spleen and in her root. So she's going to experience those centers very differently depending on her life experience, who she's spent a lot of time around, who she's currently spending her time around, and what's happening with the transits. Because the transits also will define some of those centers for her over time. It's one of the reasons you want to follow the transits. Like when we get to the full moon next week, there are 4 centers that are defined, and 3 of them are not usually defined in my chart. So that's a lot of different extra energy. So one thing, Michelle, might be to look at if you're following the transits, is when you might get some definition in there. But the main thing is to realize this is where you're here to grow and to learn, right? Is in the root center and in the spleen. Now, if you're expressing some of your definition in ways that you do not enjoy, then you can look there and look to change that. And it takes practice, it takes focus because it doesn't just change just because you think about it because it's defined. So it's kind of locked in, but you can change it. But in terms of the openness, and it's interesting because both of these centers have no activated gates at all. They're completely open. And so she has so much possibility to experience her spleen in so many different ways. And what you want to, let's remember that openness picks up and amplifies the energy of definition, either from a transit or from another person. And so, like, for example, you want to look for when you're around certain people, do you have fear come up? Because if somebody else has a defined spleen and they're really in that disempowered expression of that defined spleen and they're having a lot of anxiety or they tend to have a lot of disaster going on in their minds, then you come around them, Michelle, you're going to pick that up and amplify it. It's not going to feel very good, right? Because it's kind of co-opting that energy of your spleen and making it, turning it more into anxiety. So that's one thing to look out for is what kind of energies do you pick up and amplify and how does it feel in your body? But when your spleen is more open and more clear, right? And you don't have that operating, it's also a place for intuition because openness is very intuitive. It's where you pick up hits from the outside world, like I said, from other people or from the transits. And so it's a center for intuition. Now, you want to watch out for feeling pressure around timing because the open spleen can have this kind of, anxiety around timing because it's like, I don't know, because it changes, moment to moment and day to day. When you're around this person, you might feel like, everything's on time, everything's unfolding exactly the way it is. You're around another person, you're like, I'm late, I can't possibly get there, right? And so you could have like different experiences of time, and you want to watch out because there's so much anxiety that people have about being behind, right? I mean, so many people I talk to is like, I should really be farther along than I am right now. And I'm like, should you? Like, why do you think that? Right? Some story out there, right, that you've tapped into tells you that. But is that true? You really have to question that. And then the other thing, Michelle, will say about that open spleen is you just want to make sure that you're really taking, again, those basics, the immune system, right? It's the center for the immune system. Because it's open, you can work with it and you can definitely uplift it. But it also means that you can be susceptible to having things come through that are not necessarily the best for your immune system. So you want to watch out for that piece. And then the open root, so the root is our connection to Gaia. Now, nobody in human design that I know hardly talks about that, but the root center, right? It's the base of the spine. It is what connects us to the earth. And when you have an open root, it means you're going to experience your connection to the earth in very variable ways. And one of the best things that a person with an open root can do is have a practice of find a tree that you love, go and sit at the base of the tree and sit inside of the energy field of this great ancestor. Because when your butt is on the is on the ground, right? And you're getting to feel the way the roots of the tree are reaching down and out, right? And so you can kind of tune into that. You can be like, okay, tree, I'm really resonating with you. What does that feel like, right? Um, and then you can also feel the upliftment that comes up through that root center, right? Up through that central channel, right? And that can activate all of those centers that you have, Michelle, right? You bring extra energy up there. Because, of course, that's what's happening in the trunk of the tree. There's energy running up and down all the time. Trees are actually very busy and very active, and there's tons of movement in them. We just don't see it because it's inside. Right. And then it could also, for you, Michelle, could give you some relief perhaps from that defined head in ajna, which can get a little overbearing at times. Um, and then the other thing about the open root is you just want to make sure that you don't run adrenaline because it's associated with the adrenal glands. And because kind of when you have that open root, sometimes you don't know when to stop. And you can kind of keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. You feel like I have to keep going, right? When maybe you needed to pause a long time ago and go out and sit under a tree. Okay. So Michelle, let me know in the chat how that lands for you. And if you have another question about that. Okay. And then, okay, I'm going to put this one over here. Okay, so this is Aluna's chart, and she had a number of questions, but let me see. Yeah, so she had questions about burnout, which is one of the reasons that I talked a lot about burnout because I also think that conversation about burnout is really helpful for all of us. Because our world really fosters burnout in a very negative way. So she's asking, how did I come out of burnout as a generator? So because I've burned out 3 different times. So the first thing is the basics, right? It's like if you're burned out, you need to rest. You need to rest and you need to find a way to also calm down your mind. Okay, you need to calm down your mind and you need to calm down your fear because fear comes from the survival brain. Busy mind comes from the analytical mind being co opted by the survival brain. And all of that takes a lot of energy, a lot of energy. And it might not seem like it, but it's basically keeping your brain and your nervous system kind of on low level alert all the time. And so if you notice that, right, if the mind is busy or you can feel fear in the body, you want to engage in practices that are going to help you to create more spaciousness in your mind, more quiet in your mind, right? So that there can be a little space for you to even be able to breathe, like in your mind, right? But then you also want to release the fear from your body, and you want to look at the belief system that has generated that fear and help and start to dismantle that because you would be amazed at how much energy any one of us burns up when those different parts of us are in charge. So in addition to just those fundamentals that I said, is you want to really take command of what's going on in your mind and in your body because like I said, they can really run you ragged. Um, yeah, and I think when I just think about what I've done to restore, because I do a lot. I mean, I'm busy. I'm a busy person. I've got the 34, and Jupiter's in the 34, so Jupiter expands my busy gate, my power gate. So I'm a busy person. I do a lot, and but I also make sure that I have the fundamentals in place. And if I really start to feel like I'm depleted, I go and spend a day in nature. I go to the river, I go to the forest, I go to the ocean, and sometimes I just lie on the ground and look at the sky, or get in the river, or look at the trees and not do a lot. Like, don't go hiking, just like go and let the living world restore you. So, yeah. And then your question about the will center, Aluna, I already answered. Okay. And then same thing with the question about the gate 14. So she's got the gate 14, just known as power skills in traditional human design, but it's kind of colloquially known as the gate through which, if you have this defined, it's like you can receive abundance, but through providing service. But again, I would say the same thing. It's like, what is your relationship to that quality? If you don't have it, you're expressing the disempowered expression of it, right? So either somewhere along the way, somebody told you it wasn't right for you to do that, or you decided that it wasn't good to have to receive money through the work that you do, the service that you provide. Or that you're greedy if you want it. And this is a big thing for spiritual people, right? Is this idea that if you receive money, you're taking money from somebody else, or it's unspiritual to have money, all of that kind of stuff. You want to unpack that because that's usually what's underneath something like this. Um, Let me just see. Okay, she also asks, I'm not to initiate as a manifesting generator, but her all of her astrology are in cardinal signs, and cardinal signs all initiate the beginning of the seasons. Well, I will tell you, my friend, that all of mine are also in cardinal signs, and it was for many years because I have an Aries sun that I really thought that it was my job to initiate all the time and make things happen. But human design comes in and says, not so much. But it's not that you can never initiate, it's that it's about how you enter into things. If you enter into things through response, then you can initiate once you're in there. And so I always use my YouTube channel as a example of this, right? Is that when I was really looking at how am I going to bring my human design business out into the world, and I was looking for what I might want to do, and I was kind of looking around and looking on, YouTube, and I was like, oh, there's a lot of people teaching human design, a lot of people searching for human design on YouTube. So I responded to knowing that that was true. And then I also responded to training that I had about what could be useful for people. And I also paid attention to kind of the conversations that I heard from people about the challenges that they had with human design. And then I started creating education and videos that responded to that. Right. And then I could initiate all of that. Right. Because I entered into it through response. And the idea here is that your sacral, because all generators, their primary authority is sacral, even if you're emotionally defined. I'm going to say that, again and again, is your sacral protects you from engaging in things that are not right for you. And the problem with some manifesting generators is they have so much energy that they don't take the time to kind of use their sacral or feel into their body. Is this actually the right thing for me to do? And they just dive into stuff and make things happen. And it turned out not to be the right thing. And then they got burned out because they lost energy while they were doing it. That was my history as a generator, is I would get an idea, right? Then I would create a strategy for bringing it out in the world, all in my head, right? I'd plan it out, right? All left brain, right? And then I would go for it. And like I would create a program, people would buy it, and then I would lose energy halfway through because it wasn't either the right time or exactly the right thing. But I didn't know because at that time, didn't know about my sacral authority. So don't ever think that you're needing to respond is something that is negative and holding you back. It's actually protecting you from using your powerful energy as a generator or a manifesting generator in ways that aren't the best for you, right? That's what it's for. And so you have plenty of initiating energy. You have initiating power, but you need to use it at the right time in the right situation. Okay. So that is what I wanted to share today. I'm just gonna look over here. If you have any comments or questions about what I just shared, or if there's something that's related to your chart, that's related to what I just shared. Okay. Um, mm, mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah. Simone's saying, yeah, the persecution, wise woman, oracle healer. Exactly. Right. And this is the good news about all of that is, remember, this is the lifetime in which we can heal all the lifetimes. It's one of the reasons things are so friggin' intense, right? Is that this actually is the lifetime when we can heal all the lifetimes. And so do the work, people, do the work, and you will leave your life with so much spiritual growth, which is the only thing you take with you when you leave, right? Um, okay, so Jade is saying, "Oh, my open emotional solar plexus makes it more likely to pick up on the emotional energy of others." Yes, exact. That is exactly what it is. And so what happens? So I have an open emotional solar plexus as well. And when I was a kid, I was channeling and expressing my mother's suppressed rage, which I didn't know. I had no idea as a little kid, right? I was kind of known as an angry little kid. My brother, who is an artist, actually drew a picture of me yelling at one point. And I remember being kind of confused by that and being like, why was I an angry little kid? And then, many years later, like in my 40s, when I started really kind of going inside and learning about myself, I was like, that inner anger wasn't even mine. Right. And so this is one of the things that can happen for when you have an emotional solar plexus, is you can become overly emotionally expressive because you're channeling other people's energy that they're not taking responsibility for. But the other thing that can happen is you can become very avoidant. You can be like, ooh, there's emotional energy. I'm out of here. Right. And if you don't leave physically, you leave your body, right? Because you do not like the way that that feels. And so, one of the things for people with the emotional solar plexus open is to learn to tolerate emotional energy and not be manipulated by it. Right. And I've really learned that I do not take on other people's emotional energy. I think probably spending years to as a clarity breathwork practitioner and trainer, where I was like, had 40 people lie down and breathe and have all kinds of emotional release, I really learned it was like that. None of that is my energy, right? None of that is my energy. And that's one of the things of doing something like Kundalini is that it teaches you how to fill your auric field, including all of your human design body graph, with your own energy, and then you're less susceptible to other people's energy when you come into contact with it. That's one of the reasons I'm such a big advocate of doing that kind of energy work. Yeah. So let's see. Okay, so Deanna, I've done a ton of energy work on ancestral poverty beliefs. Yeah. And also the patriarchal wounds. Okay. Yeah. Obviously, more to do. I've created a very healthy and healing lifestyle that nurtures your energy good. Um, Quite daunting to but however, it seems that having the energy for a successful business is quite daunting before I start. Survival mode is activated just thinking about all the work. Okay, if your survival mode is activated when you start thinking about the work, um, you're not thinking correctly about the work, Deanna. I'll just say that. Okay. What you want to do is because what's happening is that you've allowed your imagination to grab on hold of what you perceive to be all the things you need to do. And then your survival brain is like, I don't, you don't have energy for that. Right. So what you want to do is just look at what is the next thing for me to do? What's the next thing? Maybe the next three things. And that's it. Okay. You do not have to go with it because the thing is that the left brain will start going, well, you need to build a strategy and you need to plan it all out. And you've got to have a plan for the next 5 years or at least for the next year. And you got to be on social media every day. Let's look at the numbers, right? That's the way your left brain is going to be, right? And you got to moderate that and say, do I really need to do all that? Like, can I just find one interview? How about if all I do is look for one interview and I make sure I have one offer? Like, just start small, right? Because that is a way that you can start to dismantle some of that fear that you have around that. Um, I have a desire, and she also says, I have a desire to depend on a partner to increase finances and also to give me energy by association. How do I feel about that? Um, depending on another person for money, it's not that it can never work. But it kind of depends on I mean, and honestly, it has worked for many people, men and women, people of all genders. It totally can work. I know couples where, one person is the moneymaker and another person like does spiritual work, for example. Or like my parents, my mother never worked for money after she married my dad. But she was a feminist activist, extremely active. She had an activist career but she didn't make money doing it. So I think you really kind of have to ask yourself, like in your heart of hearts, and you have an open heart, so you kind of need to look at that, is why am I doing that? Right. And also, you want to make sure that you're not just looking for somebody who can provide that for you because you don't want that to be the basis of your partnership. Right. I don't think it's unusual for people to want to be around others who give them energy. Right. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but you also want to make sure that you don't get addicted to generator energy or manifestor. You don't want to get addicted to generator energy, which can happen because that will burn you out too. Okay. Let's see. So, Michelle, the information landed well, explains the cause and common life that has been led. Unfortunately, lands me in the right place at the right time, right? Challenging and smooth. Okay. Open spleen, picking up other spheres and amplifying. Yeah, you got to just watch out for that, Michelle. That's like, to me, that's one of the main things because unfortunately, so many people are running so much fear right now that, that it's just really easy, to pick up. Okay. So, I, um, so Ruth, you said you sent in your chart. I don't think let me just look real quick. I don't think I received it because I looked last night. Um, uh, I'm just looking for her. Yeah, Ruth, I don't, let me just see if I can just do a search for it. Yeah, I don't know what email you sent it to, Ruth, but I'm searching for Ruth. If you want to send me um your email, I can look for it, but I didn't receive it. Um, if you did try to just use the email that comes from Kajabi, if you copied it and pasted it, it would not come to me. I tried to let people know that it would not come to me. Okay, so let's just take a real brief look. I can hang on for a few more minutes. Well, let me just check with you guys. Are you enjoying this? Do you want me to look at some more charts? You want to give me a thumbs up? Are you liking that? Okay, okay. Well, of course you can leave if you want to. Nobody's keeping you here. Okay, so here's Jade's chart. Um, okay. So, yeah, so she's got an open emotional solar plexus, which we just talked about, right? She's a manifesting generator because she has the channel of the manifesting generator. I don't know, Jade, if you put a question in the chat. If you do have because that was one of the things is I asked for a specific question. Let me know if you have a specific question. Maybe I'll just say a couple of things about your chart. So she's got the incarnation cross of the sleeping phoenix. So that is the incoming um, uh, incarnation cross. We're moving out of the cross of planning and we're moving into the cross of the sleeping phoenix, which is really a harbinger of the new earth. So just know, Jade, that's what your incarnation cross is about. Um, okay. And yeah, so she's got, this is the channel of charisma or the channel of the manifesting generator or the channel of power. It is very powerful. It is in her incarnation cross, right? It's in the top two numbers on the left-hand side. So you can see that. And so you need to make sure that you get on top of that energy because it can really run you around if you're not in charge of it. And then right underneath that, you can see she's got the gate 28 is being lit up by the north node. Okay, so the gate 28 is known as the gate of struggle. She also has the whole channel. What's lighting up her 38? So she's got Venus in the 38 and the south and the north node in the 28. And so that that channel is known as the channel of struggle, but I really like to characterize it as being on the leading edge of consciousness. Because if you think about being on the leading edge of consciousness, it can feel like a struggle. You've got a fair amount of individual circuitry right here. You've got the 2034, you've got the 2838, you've got the 55 and the 22 and the 8. That's all individual circuitry. And so individual circuitry is here to be different. It's here to bring change. And that 2838 is kind of a big assignment, honestly, because it means that you're here designed to be bringing in new forms, new possibilities, new perspectives, new potentials as we are moving in more and more into that new earth energy. And you're here to be receiving those, through this 23 that you've got here, but then all the way through that knowing circuit and through that individual circuitry. That's the main thing I would look at, right? And then I would look at your open G as well as your open emotional solar plexus, because the open G can kind of lead you to merging with other people, kind of following other people's identities or their directions in life. So you want to watch out for that. But you do have Jupiter in the eight, which is helping to mitigate that. And that's really your contribution, right? And Jupiter is here to say, um, you know, we're going to expand your contribution. So you want to make sure you're connected to your contribution. Okay, so I don't know, maybe Jay left because she didn't send in any
Oh,
particular other
yeah,
question.
I'm
Oh,
still here. I
okay.
That was really helpful. The thing that does seem notable to me is the right angle cross of the Sleeping Phoenix, which we're about to move into. And so I was like, does that mean I have a special role in this? Like, what does it mean to get on top of my energy for that?
Well, and I was speaking about the 3420 is the energy you want to get on. I wasn't talking about your
Oh,
incarnation cross per se. I was
okay.
talking about this channel
Okay.
because the 34 is the most powerful gate in the chart, right? It's busy, it's powerful, and it's sending a ton of energy to the throat. But then the 20 is patience. And so you want to have patience to deal with all that power. And the thing is that if you don't, then that energy can actually kind of run you around. I have talked to so many generators, manifesting generators with the 3420 who are kind of going in circles.
Mm.
So you want to watch out for that because you can be really busy doing nothing or not doing the right things, right? So you want to watch out for that. But yeah, I would just say here, I mean, here's the thing. We're already this new incarnation cross is already coming in, right? It's already coming in because these things happen over long periods of time. It doesn't happen on a day. Right? Sometimes people think, February 1st, 2027, the whole world's going to change. No, it doesn't happen that way. And so I would just say lean into the energies of these gates. I mean, the 55 is so incredible. It's the energy for being able to relax into knowing that you're always going to have what you need when you need to have it, right? It's the gate of faith and it's a gate of abundance. And so I would say, lean into that, right? Really grow that in yourself because, even like Deanna in her email to me, she said, "Well, I've always had enough money. I just haven't had more than enough." Well, you know what? I really think we're at a time where the energies that are coming in are helping us to relax into having enough and not feel like need to have more than enough. And the gate 55 is going to help us do that. Because like indigenous people, they don't accumulate the way Western culture has taught us that we need to do, right? We really don't need to accumulate the way that we think. And we don't really, so much of that is based in fear. It's based in scarcity, right? Nature doesn't accumulate. I mean, sometimes squirrels do, and then they can't find their nuts later. But there are and there are birds actually that go and take seeds. I saw this in Yellowstone, a thing about Yellowstone where the birds they get seeds and stuff and then they go and they plant them in certain places and they remember where they are. So, but that's not true accumulation, right? That's just like storing for the winter, right? And anybody needs to store for the winter when there isn't more things in the living world to eat, right? But that's very different than feeling like you need to accumulate, you need more and more money, or you need more and more things, or you need a faster and faster computer. Like it's really hard on us and on our nervous systems to believe that, right? You guys to see it as well as me. So that's why I'm doing it. Okay. So this will be the last thing and then we'll wrap up. Okay. Okay. So Ruth, so you are a generator, right? Because you have a defined sacral, right? Everybody with a defined sacral has is a generator of some type, either a manifesting generator, a pure generator, or an emotional generator. And so you have sacral authority, and you have, I mean, one of the things that jumps out to me is you've got a split definition, which means that you've got your ajna defined and your throat defined, and they're connected to each other. And then all your power in the lower part of your body is not connected to this part. So one thing is, do you ever feel like you're two people? You've got this mind and you've got a strong mind and you can express yourself, right? But it may not really feel connected to the power that you have down in your lower body. Because remember, the sacral is the most powerful engine in the chart. And then the root is weaker, but it's connected to the sacral. So you've got some really good power going down here. So one of the things, if you do ever feel like you're two people, is to go into a public situation where you're gonna get your split. We call it bridging your split, right? Somehow somebody else's definition is going to bring in what you need so that these two different constellations come together. But you also have, so your sun is in the 31. which means that Jupiter is activating your sun right now. Somebody else had, I think it was Deanna, had her sun also in the 31. So y'all who have the 30, your sun is in the 31. Um, the sun is gonna. Oh, so that means you're gonna have your birthday soon too, right? Is it your birthday? Yeah, I didn't even look. Yeah, it's your birthday
Next
next
week.
week. Happy birthday, um, and happy birthday to all of you with the sun in the 31. So we're gonna be moving into that alignment pretty quick here, and so. Um, but Jupiter is also going to be there. So Jupiter is going to be really activating your sun even more. So just kind of feel into yourself about that and see what would you want Jupiter to be expanding in terms of the light that you shine out into the world. And it's a really good opportunity to release any things where you might feel like you have a bushel over your sun, right? You put a bushel over you because you're afraid of being seen or known or whatever, right? It's a really good time to just take that off and allow that energy to expand for you. And then you've also got that gate 41. And so Pluto is right on top of your Earth. And Pluto's been there for 18 months. It's going to be there for another 2 years. We also, this full moon that's coming up on your birthday um, is in uh, um, is in the 41. So you're going to get a lot of energy next week, Ruth. So one thing I would just say is take a look at where you've been allowing your imagination to go because the 41 is the gate of imagination. And the nodes are the north node is moving into the gate 30, so that's going to define your spleen for you, and that's going to mean that you're going to have your emotional solar plexus defined for until the end of November. So it's a long transit, that 4130. So that's going to be a big one, and I talked about it in the transit report I released today. So those are just a couple of things and wanting to make it also kind of really relevant for you right now to be looking at the transits. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. And I want to let you all know, and then I'll come back to these questions here, because I just finally did something that I've been wanting to do for a really long time, which is that I have created 6 different options for having readings with me. In the past, I offered one kind of reading and you wanted it or you didn't want it. And now I've got 6 different options, and a number of them are like an hour long. So they're at a reduced investment compared to the longer readings that I used to do. And so I really want to invite you, if you want to have a reading, to go to just sovereignty by design / readings. It's on my website. I'll put it in the chat, but go and see what all the different ones are. So for example, one of them is looking at your chart in relation to the major transits that are coming up. So what I just did with Ruth, right, is a little bit of an example, right? It's like you can look at what are the big major transits that are coming in, what's the opportunity that's going to come to you as a result of that, and also what are the potential pitfalls that you might want to avoid, right? But then there's also one that is your soul purpose and your destiny that will focus on your incarnation cross and your north node, and really looking at your life experience and looking at your incarnation cross and seeing what's your trajectory. This is a good reading for really from about your early 40s onward, because that's when these things become more operational. So if you're in your 20s, not so much yet. I mean, you could look at your Saturn return, for example. I just did a reading for a young guy right in the in the middle of his Saturn return, and so we talked about that. But I do think that the soul purpose really becomes more available when you're a little bit older. And then there's one, there's also just one that's like whatever you want to talk about. It's like your choice, right? Topic of your choice. So it doesn't have to be a topic. And then there's also one that is actually much more in depth, which is called a foundational reading series. And it's 3 different sessions that are an hour long each one. And that's a larger investment, obviously, but you get a lot more. And that's really good for the busy person, right? Who really doesn't have time to go and study their human design for a long time. Or for the person who's like, I really learn better one on one. Like I don't learn so well from books or videos or whatever. So go and check it out, sovereigntybydesign.com / readings. And I will look forward to doing a reading with you, I hope, sometime soon. So we're going to wrap up here. And oh, yeah, different times of power. Yeah. I think just wrapping up with that is it's really worth it for you right now to be exploring how do you grow and foster and nurture your authentic power so that you can step out of the trauma triangle, persecutor, victim, and rescuer, so that you can really be living as a sovereign being fueled from the inside by your higher self. All right, my friends, that's it for today. Many, many blessings. Much love. Bye for now. We'll do more next month.